Hello once again, friends. This is David J. Welcome to another edition of Intelligetics, where we discuss all things interesting about the data sciences that contribute to business wisdom and ethical understanding. Intelligetics is dedicated to the ethical study of big data for small enterprises and individuals. Attribution for citations and quotations is available separately. So in this edition, I am going to describe the 5 essential resources you will need if you are going to work remotely in a technical role that integrates with existing developments. With all of these components available to you, you will be able to exercise your skills most effectively with the most benefits. Lacking any or all of these resources, you will find it very difficult to succeed in a technical remote role. So you should expect all of the following. The more of these you have, the easier your job will be. The fewer of them you have, the more difficult it's going to be. First, you need the supporting documentation explaining the original requirements. Second, access to the original developer. Third, secure remote access to the backend systems and applications. 4, access to the source code and its repository. And 5, access to runtime operating logs and error logs. If you are a developer, tester, technical support, systems analyst, software engineer, DBA, programmer, technical lead, or technical project manager, do everything you can to promote an environment in which all of these resources are reliably available to you. First, there's the supporting documentation with the original requirements. Comments in the code are not supporting documentation. A lot of people may think this, but frankly, I never met a developer or programmer who loved supporting documentation, writing it, or even reading it perhaps, except me. I rely heavily on documentation because I think it's a very clear support when and where you need it. And so I write good documentation for other people because I know they will rely on it. Comments in code do help, but they're insufficient per se. So make certain the documentation shows use cases and the original business and technical requirements so that you have a complete understanding of what you are trying to accomplish. Next, it's going to be really helpful if you have access to the original developer. This can be sometimes controversial, I suppose, or maybe not even controversial, but frowned upon, because especially if you have good documentation, the system owners may say you don't need access to the original developer. If possible, a knowledge transfer would be ideal, if possible. I know this is a lot to ask, especially in adversarial or dynamic environments where people do not want to talk to one another, or they speak different languages, or are just gone out of the picture because you employed a foreign subcontractor in another country. But a 5-minute conversation with the original developer can answer many of your questions and help clarify details and intent, as well as the big picture. And as I say, a full introductory knowledge transfer is ideal. Try to get that if you can. Next, you want secure remote access over a VPN to the systems and applications. I emphasize secure because you want to be respected as being ethical and honoring all security and privacy restrictions in your environment. You never want to be in a position where you could even be inadvertently accused of doing something improper. And you never want to be in a position where you accidentally do something that could either harm the system or a file or an application and you'd have to correct it. So this also includes the databases. You may need access to the database and or the data, at least to be able to perform queries so that you can do your work. You will want to be able to perform your own discovery in those systems and run some test scripts in the environment in order to see all the backend files that are available to you when you need them, in addition to the directory hierarchy. Access to the production environment may be desirable, but at least get access to a test environment that emulates what you are working on. They call it a test bed or a sandbox. You will also discover what your user profile is limited to do and see. You're also going to want access to the source code and its repository, especially if you are testing, debugging, troubleshooting, maintaining, or augmenting existing code. You will want to see what is already operating in the production environment. Then you will also know what languages you can or must employ to write your own new work based on the development standards in that environment. And then lastly, you need access to the runtime, operating, and error logs, maybe some historical logs. Logs, logs, logs. They may be a little intimidating, I suppose, or boring, tedious to work through and look at, but write your own scripts. Logs are usually highly informative, but you may have to do a lot of research in order to find exactly what you're looking for, and you have to become familiar with them so that you know which logs of which types contain the information you need. Not always, though, depending on who wrote the statements that write those logs, but by comparing various logs and the timing of their entries, you can draw reliable conclusions about the existing system, application, and code you're working on. If logs are verbose, do prepare to write scripts in, for instance, Perl or Corn Shell, if you're in a Unix environment, or regular expressions that can read them and extract the text you need without you actually opening them in a text editor. So in conclusion, do whatever you must in order to acquire all these resources before you begin work. Not having them will frustrate you and impede your work in a manner that makes you look culpable and unprofessional. But having them will support your effective contributions to a timely collaborative team. Ideally, your organization will have a code repository, a SharePoint, a shared drive, or a wiki. In my case, I like to use GitHub now. Sorry, I just paused in order to bring up my GitHub on the screen so you can see that. All of these resources neatly keep everything you need in a fashion that makes it quick and easy to retrieve, and you can share with other people, other developers and other technical people, or your internal audience, the people who are going to be doing code reviews or evaluating your analytics. So in future editions, I would like to show you live examples of how to employ all of these resources for discovery in a distributed production environment. In closing, that will lead us to another edition of IntelliJetix Law School that would reinforce the foundations of business data analytics for ethical protection of security and privacy. So until the next time, enjoy abundant results in all you do, and all the best of all to you in all you do. This is David J. signing off.